Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. It's good for that to have so many people join tonight. Um, so one of the really beautiful things that we get to do in the monastery and we get to do as monks is we have this ceremony, this called this asking forgiveness ceremony. So depending what monastery you're at, what tradition you're in, or what country you're in, um, it can really be different for when we use it, how to do it. But in Thailand and in the forest tradition, we do them fairly regularly. So we'll do these asking forgiveness ceremonies on certain big days, important days. But when we go and visit senior monks, or if a senior monk comes to our monastery. And most importantly, we do them whenever we are parting ways. So, for example, if you've been staying at a monastery for a period of time, before you leave, you'd always ask forgiveness. And, or if a senior monk has been staying for a while, has been visiting, we'll do an asking forgiveness of them before they go. So, it's a ceremony, so there's, some bowing, some chanting, all that. But basically what it is we ask whoever we're asking forgiveness from, you know, if I've done anything wrong to you by body, speech, or mind, intentionally or unintentionally, may I be forgiven. And then the other person says, yeah, I forgive you. And if I've done anything to wrong towards you, may I also be forgiven. So it's a really beautiful ceremony. We always part and leave on good terms. And it's especially important because we're we're complicated. Life is complicated. And when we live with other people for periods of time, there's always going to be some kind of friction, some kind of tension, sometimes some irritability. Well, not always, but quite often this can happen. We're all complicated. We've got our own unique personalities. We've got our own characters. We've all got our own liking and disliking. And we've also all got, these certain areas that are sensitive, are kind of our soft spots, which, we can get very easily hurt or offended. And so having this ceremony for asking forgiveness is really important. But of course, just chanting about forgiveness isn't going to necessarily put an end to all of any negative emotions we have towards other people. We've actually got to work at it, and it's a process, it's a practice of of giving forgiveness and forgiving people. But a lot of times I think there's a difference between the Buddhist concept of forgiveness and the Buddhist understanding of forgiveness versus the modern understanding of forgiveness and the modern concept. So, a few years ago, I was in Australia, and this laywoman came to the monastery, and she had never been there before. I don't think she knew much about Buddhism, but she came to visit and was chatting with me, and she started talking about forgiveness. And she really didn't like forgiveness. She really couldn't see the point of it. She thought it was weakness. And she had lived a very hard life. I think she had been hurt a lot in her life, had grown up in communism, and she thought it was weakness, forgiveness. So we sat and we talked about it, and I explained, the difference between the Buddhist understanding versus modern understanding, or at least the way I see modern understanding. So a lot of times in the modern understanding of forgiveness, there's this idea of forgive and forget. So, when if you forgive someone, it's as if it never happened. It's like we're restarting, we're going back to just how it was. I'm just gonna, so if you've done something to me and I forgive you, we're just gonna go back to the way we were before. And, we'll be friends and, have this really good connection between us. Um, Whereas the Buddhist understanding of it is a little different. When we practice forgiveness, it doesn't mean that we have to like the person afterwards. It doesn't mean we have to be friends with them. It doesn't mean to forgive. A lot of it is it's about us. It's about us letting go of all the suffering of holding on to this anger, this hurt, this humiliation, this feeling of betrayal, all these things which can lead to us holding a grudge or lead to us being angry at someone or something someone has done wrong to us. So Lumpur Cha would use this simile for suffering. He said it's like you've got a bucket, a very heavy bucket, say full of stones or full of sand, and you're holding it up in the air, and it's very painful, and you want that to end. And he'd say, you just put the bucket down. And so for us, you know, um, giving forgiveness to someone, that's putting down that bucket. That's realizing, the putting down this pain, letting go of whatever negativity we have towards them. Because if you think about it, when you're angry at someone, when you're holding a grudge to someone, how does that feel? How does it feel when you're thinking negative thoughts about someone? How does it feel when you're thinking neutral thoughts about someone or you're thinking positive thoughts about them? How does it feel when you have negativity towards someone? How does it feel when you have positivity towards someone? How does it feel when you're thinking again and again about something bad which has happened to you in the past? Somehow someone has harmed you or wronged you in some way. So for us, forgiveness is really about putting that down, letting go of that. And again, it doesn't have to have that idea of forgetting and just going back to the way it was. You can forgive someone and decide you don't want to be friends with them, or remembering what they did without holding it as a grudge. So, for example, say at the monastery, um, someone comes to visit the monastery, and every time they come to the monastery, they steal something. And so, you know, I can forgive them for stealing it, but then I can say, okay, next time he comes to the monastery, I keep an eye on him. I haven't forgotten what he did. I'm not angry about it, but I keep an eye on him to make sure he doesn't do it again. Or just say, actually, you can't come to the monastery anymore. Not angry at you, but you're always stealing. You can't come back to the monastery anymore. So we do use our critical thinking and our discernment and our wisdom um, with this. And I think another place where a lot of misunderstanding can happen with forgiveness is I think a lot of people think forgiveness is kind of to forgive someone is a quick momentary thing. You just make this mental determination or you get this intention to forgive them. I forgive you, and then it's over and it's like you flipped a switch and you've let go of all that negativity and you've let go all of that. And maybe for some people it's like that, but from my experience, it's much more of a process. So it takes time, and a lot of times you have to work at it, so it over time it gets better and better. And sometimes it goes through ups and downs. So sometimes as it's getting better, your relationship with the person is getting better, or you're letting go of all this anger or hurt, and then all of a sudden something kind of reminds you of it, kind of triggers you a bit, and then the anger might come up again. But again, it's impermanent and you're generally going in the right direction. But it's not a passive process. So it's not that I just make this determination that I'm going to forgive someone and that it's just going to automatically start forgiving on its own. a lot of times it has to be an active process. We have to put effort into forgiving them. We have to, take it on as a practice and work on forgiving the other person. So I think one of the important things is in the beginning is to actually really want to forgive the other person. And I know it's like, well, we understand that, um, holding on to this anger or holding on to a grudge is suffering. It creates this unhappy feeling. It's this completely optional type of suffering, and we can choose the option of letting it go. So why wouldn't we? But again, we're a lot of times we're more complicated than that. So sometimes maybe not even on the cognized level, but on the felt level, there's just this deep feeling that some people get is this person has wronged me. They've said something which hurt me or done something which hurt me. So by holding on to a grudge or being angry at them, by not forgiving them, it's some kind of I'm getting justice for this. I'm getting back at them. They've hurt me, so I'm going to hurt them by not forgiving them. Or sometimes it's even on this felt level, like you feel if I forgive this person, it's almost like I'm condoning what they did. By forgiving them, it's almost saying it's okay. They got away with it. Or if it's been a grudge which you've held for a while, letting go of it is almost kind of, can feel like you're admitting defeat. You're admitting you're wrong and they're right. But it's really not like this. Because again, with forgiveness, it's about yourself. It's I don't want to suffer about this. I don't want to create this suffering about it. I don't want to live in this prison of the past, being governed by this past event and it's still affecting me now. So it's not about them, it's about me. I want to let go of this. But there's so much um sense of self can be created around, your anger, our hurt, our stories, holding on to this pain or and also there's so much attachment there. Anger and aversion is a form of attachment. Even look at the way we speak about it in English. We say we're holding a grudge, that holding, we're holding on to it, so it's even in English, the way we speak about it really um, illustrates the attachment we can have to it. So, we just can reflect on the reasons why it's better to let go of a grudge, the negativity of holding on to this negative of all these negative emotions. And so once we've really decided we want to get over this grudge and to actually practice forgiveness, one of the important things is we don't want to keep feeding that negativity. We don't want to keep feeding that grudge. So we've got to, by feeding it, this is really, thinking about it and spinning it over in our head. You can just go over and over it again and really proliferate on it. And this is one of those things which just keeps it going. You see when you have this grudge against someone, over time it gets worse and worse and worse to the point where it's like you just hear their name and you're just like, oh no, and you just cringe. But but and a lot of that is just feeding it. So sometimes you'll see in life, someone who you'll see someone and they've got this really strong grudge against someone else. They've got this really negativity towards them, and they've been angry at them sometimes for years or decades. And you ask them, oh, what did they do? What happened between them? And sometimes it's just the most minor little like comment. The person said a really unskillful, unkind, insensitive thing, and this person has held on to it for so many years and spun it up in their head and made it worse and worse and worse. So first thing we want to stop feeding that. So we don't want to keep thinking it over in our head. And when we catch ourselves doing that, we want to try to stop ourselves and let go of it. But then the Buddha gave us these five different uh, practices to do to try to get over a grudge to someone else. So one of them is to practice loving kindness to the other person. So you really actively try to cultivate metta towards them. Or the second one is to develop karuna or compassion towards this other person. The third one is to practice equanimity towards this person. The fourth one is if it's really bad, and we're able to, just try to avoid the person. Sometimes if it's, we work together or we're in a situation where we interact a lot, sometimes that can be quite difficult. But sometimes, you really need just that cooling off space. So you can try avoiding them or taking some time away from them for a bit. And the fifth one is to reflect on karma. Be like, okay, well, he's done this. He's the one who's made the karma from this. I make my own karma. I don't want to make bad karma by, thinking or doing or saying something unskillful, saying something bad. So it's really interesting in those five practices. The first three are three of the four Brahma Viharas, or um, the divine abidings. The one which the Buddha left out of there was mudita, or appreciative joy, which I guess really makes sense. If you've got a grudge against someone or you're angry at someone, it's uh, it's hard to delight in the good things which are happening to them. So that one the Buddha didn't add in there. But so I find also for me one of the things that sometimes works is actually pushing myself to speak to the other person, not have a super close buddy conversation, because sometimes, you do get into that you're angry at someone, they've hurt you, so you just want to pull back, you want to stonewall them. So for me, it's sometimes I will push myself to try to start some kind of conversation, break that ice, and that can help with the forgiveness process. But again, we're all going to be different, so we've all got to find kind of different techniques and different ways of doing this. But one of the things that I do find a lot of people have problems with, and the one person that a lot of people find very difficult to forgive, is a lot of people find it's very difficult to forgive themselves. So we can be very hard on ourselves and unforgiving of ourselves. And we can hold a much higher standard for ourselves than we do for other people. So you'll see we'll sometimes not forgive ourselves for things we forgive other people for, and be really, really down on ourselves about them and hold on to it. So a number of years ago, I was living in Wat Pah Nanachat, the International Forest Monastery in Thailand, and we were building a new meditation hall and a new sala. So we built it ourselves. We weren't using cranes and stuff like that. It was all monk power, and and so it's quite tall. It's about 20 meters tall, and in one section, on maybe the top 10 meters of it, there's this brick facade on both sides of the meditation hall. And so we were doing that, and we lift the bricks up by, you just put the bricks in a bucket on a rope, and someone pulls up the rope and takes the buckets up, drops the rope back down. You put more bricks in it. So myself and this other monk were doing this, and I was going and getting bricks and putting in the bucket, and he was pulling them up onto the roof. And we were doing this, going for a while, and then he dropped some bricks, and they land right beside me, like just missed my head, coming down 10 meters, and they just smashed to pieces beside me. And I wasn't very shaken. I was just, at first you're kind of a little surprised it happened, but I was just kind of like, oh well, that happens. Good thing I didn't get hit. And you just go stand a little further away. But the monk who dropped them, he was really shaken by it. He came and he was super apologetic, and I was like, no, no, no problem. Don't worry about it. I'm fine. Look. And and he was really hard on himself. And you could see he was really not being forgiving of himself. Where like I know this monk, he's super nice monk, and he would have absolutely forgiven someone else for doing that, but he was really getting hard on himself for doing that. Or I remember when I was a layman, I met this man and he was in his 80s, and he really still hadn't forgiven himself for something he did 40 years earlier. He had been in an argument with his wife, told her to go to hell, and he was still hated himself because he never actually apologized to her for that, even though she forgave him and they lived together for years and years after that, up until she died. But he never forgave himself for that. So it's really important for us to not just forgive other people, but also forgive ourselves too. You know, we're all deserving of forgiveness, and we all make mistakes. We all do unskillful things. So we have to be able to learn from it and let go and move on. Though I'm not encouraging being completely like narcissistic or sociopathic and not ever accepting you've ever said or done anything wrong, but to actually be able to let go of these and move on and be able to forgive ourselves and forgive those people, because at the end of the day, this is a way for us to reduce our suffering. We're trying to get rid of these attachments. We're trying to suffer less. We want to be able to become enlightened and reach true happiness. So I think I'll maybe offer this to everyone for reflection this evening.